The economy is being destroyed. I know it, you know it, everybody knows it, and the super wealthy financier class that's doing all this is looking forward to seeing it all crumble. Because in their minds, it means they can trap you in infinite debt and turn you into a slave for their big entropy machine. This is why they tell you that you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's a threat. You will be happy or else. But I'm here to tell you that there is an alternative. Instead of owning nothing, you could own a piece of pretty much everything, because quite frankly, a piece of everything belongs to you. It's your birthright as a human being. And the financier class really don't want you to know that this can be done. Did you know that you can have all the benefits of having a landlord and also the benefits that landlords sort of pretend you have because of them, without the need for a landlord? Did you know that it's possible to actually be motivated to do your job? To show up at the office and feel like you're contributing to something that you are a part of? Did you know that it's possible to live in a world where everything isn't a scam and everyone isn't constantly trying to pull a fast one on you? Did you know that you don't have to be in crushing debt for the entirety of your life? And that a faceless mass of ultra-rich people don't need to be able to hold that over you like a loaded gun to make you live the worst life imaginable? Did you know that it is entirely possible for you to be happy, but the people who own the world just sort of decided that you shouldn't be? In the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, the Italian government, like all governments of the world at this time, was faced with a problem. They liked having an economy where, people worked, they made products were sold, but because of a bunch of cokeheads in New York wanted to do a big scam and make a lot of money selling nothing, companies were failing all over the world. And without companies, workers go unemployed, machines go unoperated, products go unmade. People who need those products lose access to them. They lose the ability to do the things they need to operate their own machines and make their own products. It all stalls terribly, and that's what economic collapse looks like. But they thought, hey, all these workers in the companies that are going bankrupt, they want to be working. They want to continue operating the machines. It's the bosses who don't want to pay them anymore. Why don't we use our generous unemployment benefit program to let them pool their benefits and buy out the company from those bosses? And then the workers can keep working there. And this simple scheme saved a huge amount of companies and jobs from disappearing. The survival rate of these co-ops was almost twice as high as comparative non-co-op businesses. People just sort of stayed employed. The corporations kept on trucking. Goods were manufactured. Services provided. And after the crisis was over, those workers were by and large making more money than they would have if they weren't co-owners. But how? If these companies were going bankrupt, unable to compete in the economy, how did the simple act of handing them over to the workers save them? Worker-owned cooperatives have for a long time been known to be much more resilient, especially in times of crisis, than corporations owned by individual stakeholders. A lot of these companies didn't need to fail at all. They were just sort of abandoned by their owners because they were struggling to generate profit. This is all a bit simplified, of course, but Italy has a lot of experience with co-ops. They didn't come up with this scheme during the financial crisis. It's called the Marcora law, and they had already implemented it in the 80s. In many parts of Italy, especially around the north, where the actual economy of the country is situated, co-ops have been the predominant form of business for a long time. They understood that fundamentally any institution is going to generate value to the people it is accountable to. That's just how any human endeavor is going to be structured. But value is actually a complicated thing to quantify at times. Steady employment over a long period of time, allowing me to plan my life and raise my family, that is value. A high-quality product that works well and lasts me a long time, that is value. An agglomeration of expertise in a single place creating great innovation, is value. Investing in a new generation of workers through apprenticeships is value. Doing fun marketing that puts a smile on people's face is value. Having a corporate headquarters that is nice to look at and fits in with the local aesthetic of wherever it is situated is value. But how do you put a number on these things? There are institutions for which this sort of arithmetic has been made, though they're rarely private companies. NASA famously is very expensive to run, but they did the math and found that just sort of having this many smart people develop technology together and then making the patents semi-public, essentially for free, has created immense economic opportunity. And what they didn't even quantify was what the optimism of space exploration has done for the human spirit, or what collaboration between space agencies has done for international relations. More common example, we all understand that libraries create immense public value by giving everyone access to wisdom, knowledge, and education. No sane person is out there hating on the library. Who benefits from these abstract forms of value? Well, it's not the owners of the company, I can tell you that much for free. The only value that benefits the owners is profit. The bottom line. A surplus of money generated that can go into their pocket. It's also very easy to quantify compared to all this other stuff. The problem is, of course, that in a way, profit removes value from the company. It does not get reinvested into the company. By definition, profit is the money that is left over after reinvestments. And in the overwhelming majority of cases, it removes that value into the pockets of people who don't actually contribute anything to the company. They just happen to own a piece of it. Usually because at some point they, or often one of their ancestors, fronted the company some money. In a world where that means they are now owed infinite money back forever. We love stories about like how the founder of the company owns the company, but that's rarely a reality. We love to talk about innovation, but the innovators work for the company. They will not be seeing the profits from what they do. The company owns their work, and they will squeeze them as much as they can. When the owner of a company contributes to its operation, they do it in the form of their labor, in which case they should be paid accordingly. Sometimes these sort of people put in a lot of work that needs to be rewarded, but literally every single cent is not accordingly. Administration, management, leadership, these are labor. Even important labor. But that's being a manager, not an owner. Having an owner does not do anything for the company at all. And why would it? What does being owned do for anyone? Owners are going to optimize everything they can in order to make sure the only type of value the company produces is profit. This is why when the workers become the owners, the structural priorities of the company as an institution change in such a way that it will weather the storm of economic turmoil. The whole point of the company ceases to be generating value for owners. Now it needs to generate other forms of value as well. Now, historically, owners have been much more closely linked with the companies they own. They sometimes knew their workers or lived in the same overall communities. They cared about legacy, being liked, and thus allowed corporations to also generate other forms of value, because it was to their own benefit. Never as much as would have been ideal, but at least there was something. But that is no longer the world we live in. Nowadays what happens is that profit takes money out of the company and moves it into the wonderful world of finance. The economy, trading, futures, financial instruments, esoteric math magics that somehow make trillions of dollars doing nothing in particular. It's gambling. It really is just gambling. It's a lot of very complex and sophisticated gambling wreathed in layers and layers of euphemism and deception. It's a big casino for the ultra wealthy, the Epstein class. That's what I mean when I say financier class. There are, of course, also ordinary people with money in there, mostly in the form of retirement funds. But what ordinary people have in there is crumbs compared to what the ultra-wealthy make. And they're the ones who duped them into putting the money in there in the first place. In fact, that money mostly serves to make sure that when the ultra-wealthy lose, there is something to plunder and make up their losses. Aside from taxpayer money, of course. They will be betting against your money, make you go long while they go short. They own the hedge funds that control your 401k, and they are going to insider trade because there are no consequences for these people destroying your grandma's life savings. The problem with the finance economy is that it doesn't actually do anything. It produces nothing. It's bets stacked on top of bets, endless networks of middlemen trying to make a quick buck by screwing over everyone else. That money does not recirculate back into the actual economy of real things. It makes money, but it does not create commerce. Think of the economy as a vast and complicated ecosystem, a network of symbiotic and adversarial relationships. Plants, animal, fungi, geological and chemical processes, trees, mosses, ferns, ants, woodpeckers, and bears. These are the entities that exist in this economy, and they need each other in order to thrive. No element of the economy can exist in isolation. When your employer pays you money, they rely on the existence of an outside economy where you can spend that money in order for it to be worth anything in the first place. In order for this ecosystem to be productive, it needs water. Money is that water. It's the economic lifeblood that enables the transactions of goods and services in the first place. Without it, the entire web of life just collapses. And what the financialization of the economy has been doing at an ever-accelerating pace is construct a vast and elaborate system of pumps and pipelines to pull more and more water out of that ecosystem. Where it ends up is the gold-plated indoor fountain of a great big casino, performing the wildest pirouettes for the entertainment of people who own the forest, but who have never even seen it. This decreases what in economic terms is known as the velocity of money, the amount of transactions a piece of money facilitates. A buck you spend at the home improvement store goes to pay the manufacturer of that power drill, to the chemical engineer who operated the vat for the green plastic casing, to the local supermarket for a packet of pasta, to a grain farmer who invested in a new harvester, and so on and so on. A financialized buck is only ever passed back and forth between casino tables. And so, slowly but surely, and at a terribly accelerated pace since the pandemic, the ecosystem of the economy has been cascading into collapse. Everything needs more and more water, everything needs to grow, but there just isn't enough to go around. Which is weird, because we have more than enough economic capacity that every person on Earth could have a comfortable life easily. But the water's in the fountain in the casino. This is what's destroying the economy. This is why you can't find a job, why the job you have pays so poorly, why instead of owning a house you pay more rent than your landlord pays as their mortgage. They take all that money out of the actual economy of goods and services and throw it into the big entropy machine in hopes of catching a fluke, which they of course expect in the form of infinite growth. You don't just get a return on investment, you get an ever-growing return that gets bigger and bigger every 3 months. And in order to save the big entropy machine from collapsing, they take more and more and more money out of the real economy and pump it in there, because it is essential that the illusion of the big entropy machine not collapse. The entire point of the neoliberal project of the last 30, 40, 50 years has been to privatize anything and everything so it can be restructured to generate only profit. They pointed at all the things and said, look, this generates no value, when in fact it was generating enormous amounts of value. It just wasn't generating much profit. Famous example, Deutsche Bahn, German trains known to be punctual, a huge network of comfortable journeys in the heart of Europe. They looked at that and said, this has to generate profit. And so even though the German government is still the owner, they have restructured the company for profit seeking. And the only thing that has happened is that trains are now notoriously shit to travel with in Germany. If they show up at all, they will be late. They will be uncomfortable. The workers will be underpaid, and the prices will be astronomical. Meanwhile, Countless stations have been closed. Many, especially rural areas, are no longer served by this essential form of public transportation, devastating local economies. And that's just one pretty famous example. You've probably seen worse. It's not just public assets being privatized, of course. Every business is being cashed out for casino chips. The Epsteinite financier class is liquidating the entire economy to fuel their gambling habit. This is what private equity is all about. They buy a business and then completely ruin it by ruthlessly pulling every milliliter of profit out of it until it is completely desiccated. Businesses that might otherwise work are no good to the financialized economy because the process of providing goods and services is suboptimal. There is overhead to making typewriters and selling soda, and it's a much easier return on investment to leverage that business to make empty money on the stock market. You just put it up as collateral as you borrow money to gamble with, and maybe you get lucky enough to pay it back. You and me, we live off making things. To these people, making things is a loss. This is why everything is constantly and shitifying. Even trustworthy big-name brands where you pay for quality are now flimsy because there's more money to be made selling the reputation of that brand name than to continue making good products. The financier class, ironically, has no investment in the things they own. They do not care about making a good product to compete in the market. There is no actual risk to them. They own 1,000 other businesses they can ruin tomorrow. And selling everything quickly just so happens to be making the most amount of money right now. They don't even want there to be a strong economy. They just want to own you so they can pass money back and forth between themselves while you build their mansions. If the entire economy becomes a series of scams, it's not their problem. They'll be the ones doing the scamming. You end up the one being scammed. It's actually historically unprecedented that in order to secure your means of subsistence, you would have to work for someone else. Very, very recent thing. Usually people just sort of had access to their stuff. The stock market has only been around for a few centuries, and the stock market as it exists today has only been around for a few decades. It's an unnatural process that stops the circulation of the lifeblood of the economy. The relationship kind of goes the other way around too. You may very well think that the economy is something you profit from. So when it's doing well, you think you're going to benefit from that. When in fact, it is the engine through which wealth is extracted from you. The only thing that trickles down is the spit. This is not an accident. The outcome of a system tends to also be its purpose. The problem with capitalism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. But until that has happened, they've built the system to take away all your resources as a worker. Of course, if you know this, you will be against it, naturally. So the financier class needs to weave a complex deception to ensure you remain compliant. A lot of money that could be more productively used is spent on this propaganda. They want you to think that you don't deserve your resources, that they don't belong to you, that their ownership of the world you inhabit is divinely ordained, and you, the person doing the actual work, deserve only to be exploited. You should be grateful that you receive crumbs. They want you to think that they are the ones who are indispensable to the economy, the pump that runs the water through the ecosystem, that they are the engine that drives commerce. But as we've established, this is not commerce. This is gambling. The unfortunate truth of our age is that a job creator is someone who figures out how to threaten you with starvation unless you do something you don't want to do. You can see their mentality reflected in yourself. Why is it that you think the market is about competition, when the truth that is obvious to anyone who thinks about it for 5 minutes is that in order to make something, you need to work together with others. Everyone just seems to be looking for the latest get-rich-quick scheme to get ahead and trick some suckers into giving them enough money so they're wealthy enough to escape reality. Nobody wants to work anymore, especially young people. And why would they, really? There's nothing to be gained from it. It's a symptom of a deeply diseased economy that the way to make a good life for yourself is no longer to do a good job, but to run some sort of pyramid scheme. And this adversarial scam mentality makes the economy so much less efficient. It's not complicated. Things just work better when you're not expecting everyone to stab you in the back. But everything always has to be maximally inconvenient because middlemen must have their niches. Everyone is trying to be that middleman who gets a cut from the work of others without actually having to put in any work themselves. When there's a new infrastructure project, bullshit panic is drummed up to make endless environmental impact reports by law firms who specialize in stealing taxpayer money that way. No one involved actually cares about the environment. Corporations destroy perfectly good product they make all the time, creating artificial scarcity to keep the price high. It is a very inefficient use of production capacity. They let factories and production facilities sit empty because they have much more value as an asset that can be leveraged to borrow money against. And they don't want anyone else to use them to make product either because they don't want there to be more product. Property developers create legal landscapes in which actually building things is excessively difficult, so the value of the things already built can appreciate. They are increasing the price of production needlessly. Nobody lives in those places, by the way, but they are a speculative investment vehicle that can be leveraged to borrow money and then make more money on the gambling market. And they didn't even acquire all that wealth. They inherited it from people who acquired it in ways that we today might well consider theft. And if you can't get ahead in a world where infinite resources are wasted on creating friction and competition where things should run smoothly, it's your fault for not being ruthless enough. Only bad people would create a world where you have to be a bad person to succeed, and then blame good people for not being evil enough. But you know as well as I do that if you are a good person, all you get to be is the sucker for them to exploit. One of the great indicators of the scam that is the financialized economy is GDP per capita, which economists have long pointed out is a terrible way of measuring the quality of an economy. The gross domestic product is every transaction of money in an economy put together. I pay you $100, I get to slap you. You then pay me $100, you get to slap me. We do this 10 times, and we have created $1,000 of GDP. Most of this, especially in America, is the money passed around the great big casino. Some of this they have to estimate, like for instance the retail of black tar heroin to teenagers, someone hiring a hitman to kill their ex, the gambling proceeds from dogfighting rings. That's all part of GDP, by the way. You know what's not in there? You helping your grandma carrying the groceries upstairs. A mother comforting a crying child. Your neighbor lending you a set of pans for the weekend. Your cousins having a great time lounging in the park. Your uncle helping your son with his math homework. Compassion, solidarity, neighborliness, family. None of these things involve a transaction of currency, so they are not part of GDP. To the political world, which is dedicated entirely to the maximization of that one metric, they are utterly worthless. And they would in fact be more useful if they were monetized. It's no surprise to me that the Epstein class forces the world to follow a metric where the sale of child pornography is considered superior to volunteering at an animal shelter. When I'm having a barbecue, you're at my place. When you're having a barbecue, I'm at your place. Why do we have two grills? But if you and I, and all the folks in the neighborhood too, would buy a big shed together, where we keep gardening tools and home improvement tools and maybe a grill or two, we'd be saving a ton of money we could spend on other things. This is really no different than a library, and in fact, you can borrow all kinds of equipment, not just books, from most libraries today. It's called a library of things. You should check it out. It's great. This is what these people don't want you to be doing. We recoil from this idea a little bit, don't we? We think there must be a problem with it. It makes us feel powerless somehow, even though it empowers us to have more access to more things. It feels wrong, maybe even immoral somehow, to deprive the financier class of its bottom line. That is how deep the propaganda sits in all of us. To maximize GDP, the Epstein class must atomize and isolate communities, drive people apart, ensure they never help each other. Because the best place to increase GDP is by putting a price tag on something that would otherwise have been free. Not that they won't take what is free. Google profits off people's willingness to add helpful information to Google Maps for absolutely no personal gain. They have inserted themselves as a middleman who can monetize this labor. Something that adds massive value to everyone's life is Wikipedia. One of the great wonders of the world, one of the greatest achievements of the human species. And very powerful people have been trying to have it shut down basically since its inception, while at the same time training their AI models on it. The fact that Wikipedia continues to be independent is because the people who control it are absolute gigachads with ironclad principles. Educational television has been replaced by bullshit lie slop, because documentaries about ancient aliens are just cheaper to make than something which involves actual research and academic rigor. Related to that, one of the areas most ruined by profit-seeking is scientific publishing. Not only wasting the time of the most brilliant scientists in the world in the pursuit of research grants, but gating access to scientific papers behind unreasonable paywalls. It also creates a whole slew of perverse incentives to do bad science that will yield sensational results quickly. It introduces massive error and bias that should be entirely absent in scientific publishing. It should be antithetical to the very concept of science. But in this crucial area, it bends to the profit motive, because we have to increase that GDP, baby. This is obviously deleterious to science and human technological progress, and everyone knows it. Speaking of which, the tech industry, hailed as the great innovator of our age. And yes, especially in the early days, for like 2.5 weeks, they brought a lot of revolutionary tech to market. Of course, most of the actual infrastructure for that tech had been developed by universities and the like, and with taxpayer money. But you know, who gives a shit? It's like this for literally everything. Their business model has for a long time been to buy up competitors and destroy them while improving their own product as little as possible, because this would cost money and carry risk. The way you make it in the tech world is you do a startup that claims to do something, and then you get bought by a big company. That's if you're lucky. Sometimes they will just steal your shit and then silence you every way they can. This has been happening from day one. The reason Elon Musk is as wealthy as he is because he made a shitty PayPal competitor, and in order to keep their monopoly, PayPal just bought him up with a deal that included stock options. Since the inception of Silicon Valley, its primary product has been the strangulation of the inevitable innovations in information technology. A huge number of projects have been destroyed by big tech companies precisely because they might offer superior products, which these people really do not want to come to market. But you have AI-generated code in your Windows 11 now. The reason we don't have easily interoperable platforms is because someone needs to make them shit by extracting a profit. This is why every tech product is getting worse, why Google constantly shuts down services. Making products that make money by being useful to users is just not the priority. Their actual customers are investors looking to buy infinite growth, and their actual clients are services that sell your personal data, which are themselves massively overvalued. The AI industry is the ultimate manifestation of this scam. Massive amounts of money being passed back and forth between huge corporate players to make it seem like things are in motion, generating GDP to convince investors to put more money into the bubble. But it's all just people passing hundreds to each other for slapping each other in the face. This has ripple effects. People in the real economy can't buy RAM because chips that have not yet been manufactured are to be put into graphics cards that don't exist, which are to run in data centers that have not been built to fuel a technology that consumers do not actually want. All of the growth in the AI sector is them putting AI in things where it doesn't do anything, and nobody wants it, where it usually makes things worse. But now the managers can put on the presentation that more users are using AI. This is inefficient, but it's what happens in financialized economies. And listen, deep learning is a genuinely cool technology, but all the stuff that sees actual investment is shitty image and text generation, which are the things that this technology is arguably worst at. But it's flashy enough to create a lot of publicity. And what the people who own all the money in the world are really being sold is tools to control the population by making you stupid and surveilling your every move. Right now, the AI bubble is the only thing making the GDP balance sheet of the United States look good. The rest of it is an actual economy deep in recession. Everyone on the ground knows, while there are no jobs, there are plenty of things to do. Everyone can see the crumbling infrastructure. Everyone can see the people who need help. Everyone can see the havoc wrought on the very nature that sustains us. And they know they could do something about it. They want to. But it's not good for profit extraction. So it doesn't happen. And I'm not even only talking about climate change here. The neoliberal ideology of making everything as profitable as it can be, especially when it comes to government and deficit spending, has created a huge maintenance debt. Most of the infrastructure that the Western world runs on was built decades, sometimes centuries ago, by people who wanted to invest into the future. But that infrastructure needs maintenance. It needs upgrades. It needs development. And all that's been happening is neglect, because maintenance costs money, and upgrades cost even more money. And that neglect, you can just not put it on the balance sheet. In the rare cases something is overhauled, it is done in the cheapest and shittiest way possible, so private entities can be paid the maximum amount of taxpayer money thinkable. This isn't just roads and railways either, it's community development, public health, people's access to quality education, the social safety net, quality of life, and of course, the strain we put on the local and global environment. The longer this goes on, the greater that maintenance debt becomes. And it's rising exponentially. The reason you do maintenance is to avoid very costly disasters down the line. Climate change is only the clearest example of this. It was created by profit-seeking, and it is already creating massive losses. But all the economy is focused on is extracting maximum profit right now. The cost is going to be immeasurable, and if the financier class gets its way, it will land on the shoulders of a sickly, poorly educated, brain-rotted, elderly society. Their goal, their explicitly stated goal for the future, is to trap us all in debt and force us to work for nothing like we are medieval serfs. They will commercialize and financialize every little thing until they can make a world where you have to let them rape your children in order to be able to feed them. And then they will still let them starve. As unthinkable as it may seem, there is an alternative to this. There's actually more than just one alternative to this. This is just one that I personally really like, and which people have been doing for a long time. I am talking about cooperative ownership. The principle is simple. Instead of psychopaths who were born rich owning everything, the people who actually own things are the people who have a stake in those things. In other words, you. It's a way of harnessing the immense power of economies of scale and large, interlinked institutions for ordinary people as opposed to the financier class. It actually democratizes the economy in a meaningful way, makes monopolies and quasi-monopolies much less of an issue because the benefits actually flow back into society, and co-ops have an innate propensity to collaborate in order to create better commerce. There's no one way to do a co-op. There's a number of different possible arrangements, and they can all be flexibly tailored to whatever the situation requires. The simplest and perhaps more ubiquitous form of co-op is the business co-op, where the employees collectively own the business. The whole Italian thing. They don't just do it in Italy, but they do it a lot there. They kind of function like corporations do now, at least in their day-to-day. They just have no interest in exploiting their workers or their customers. When it comes to matters of company direction and policy, they vote. which is not too different from how most companies work already, except instead of outside investors that only want profit sitting on the board, it's the people who actually have a vested interest in the company because they go to work there every day. They usually still appoint management executives, because management, as the intersection of leadership and administration, is a skill. And it's at times difficult work. The difference here is that managers are not gods, and management in a co-op does not exist as a class of hall monitors who get a little something extra so they will keep the boot on the necks of their fellow workers. It's just one of the many other inefficiencies of privately owned businesses. The only way to advance tends to be a promotion into management, which also means you stop doing the work. If you are really good at plumbing, and the only advancement option is to stop doing that and manage, that is a net loss for the company. In a co-op, managers are laborers who do the labor of management, which is why co-ops do tend to have fewer managers. It's just not useful or efficient for them to have a whole cadre of self-important fuckwits who do nothing all day except massage the numbers into making themselves look good. Co-ops often still have salaried positions, and some of those salaries might be bigger than others. The key is that profits are distributed among the worker owners of the company, either equally or according to a specific distribution key. Some larger co-ops are organized in federations, where the employees of a local branch own that local branch, and then each local branch owns a piece of the overarching co-op that coordinates everything. Mondragon, the biggest co-op in the world and one of the most important economic players in the Spanish economy, works like this. And it kinda has to, because though they sort of started out as a company that makes heaters, they now do pretty much everything from supermarkets to legal advice to telephones. You might see a similarity here superficially to those Japanese megacorporations that make trains, keyboards, washing machines, massage therapy equipment. One reason for this is that historically and for political reasons, aka they fucked around with hyper-financialization and found out, the Japanese economy is very focused on actually making and selling products. These companies are of course not co-ops, but most of the problems they have would disappear effectively overnight if they were. You don't need to be like a full co-op for the co-op model to already make your company better. My favorite example of this actually comes from the tech industry. Valve. Now, Valve is majority owned by Gabe Newell, who is also a very principled guy, but a huge amount of it is owned by its employees, and Gabe Newell very strongly believes in workplace democracy. Valve is far from perfect, of course. They fuck up and make questionable decisions all the time. But there is a reason why people stick to Steam over years, in decades, in spite of a plentitude of alternatives. There is a reason why Team Fortress 2 has such staying power, and why people are still excited for the studio's next shooter. They are reliable. They want to sell their platform as a good product, while every other sales platform constantly shoots itself in the face by trying to run scams and shitifying their service the moment they feel like they have some sort of captive audience. All Valve needs to do is have any amount of interest in its customers whatsoever, prioritize them only a teeny little bit, and they keep edging out the competition to the extent that they dominate the virtual games market, no matter how many exclusive titles the competition manages to strong-arm into their portfolio. And in spite of running his company much like a co-op, Gabe Newell is obscenely rich. Gaben and I, we have a little bit of beef, because he purchased a submarine from Elon Musk, of all people, and it had a cool name of one of my favorite sci-fi franchises, the Culture novels. It was called The Limiting Factor, and he renamed it. Now, the new name of the submarine is also cool, but the Culture is fantastic, and I don't understand how it can be that Elon Musk has read it if it's like completely antithetical to every element of his ideology. Like one of the novels, the main villain is a tech industry billionaire. I'm getting fucking sidetracked here. Listen, Valve could also be a whole lot better, but this is what just a little bit of being a co-op does for you. And wouldn't it be interesting if the users and employees owned Steam together to an extent? This would make it a consumer co-op, or I suppose half a consumer co-op, which raises the question, What if you could own your local supermarket? If you often go to the same store, as most people do, it's not unlikely you already have some sort of customer loyalty card that gives you shitty little trinkets by making you feel like a great saver. What if that card just sort of made you a co-owner? What if living in the locality the supermarket serves made you a co-owner? Huge supermarket chains often run rigid operations that serve only to extract money from the community they sit in, to destroy local shops strategically. A co-op would have a much easier time responding to local needs and working with regional suppliers, meaning a lot of money would go to local farmers and manufacturers. You get value in the convenience of the local grocery store being accessible to you without an hour's drive, with a curated selection of things you like. Versions of this exist liberally in Germany, where several of the biggest supermarket chains are federated as buyers' co-ops, giving them both the flexibility of a small local operation and the immense logistical power of a huge conglomerate. Now, the ones we have here in Germany are usually not consumer-owned, but owned by just like the guy who owns the local supermarket. But there's no reason why this must be the case. In the UK, the co-op supermarket group looks at how much money you spend at their supermarket and pays out a dividend that gets bigger the more money you spend. Of course, this is not going to make your groceries free, obviously, but can you even imagine getting money back because your supermarket did well this year? It's a real thing that really happens all the time, and it could happen to you. You could also own your landlord. Housing co-ops offer apartments, or certainly living space. Some of them have houses too. And if you rent one of those apartments, you become a co-owner. And it'll cost you about as much as a deposit will, except you'll actually see any of that money again. These actually do all the things that landlords claim to do. They repair stuff. They keep the building in good condition. They develop in the interest of the community that lives in the houses they own because they're actually accountable to them. When they generate income, they will use it to make your building nicer, or maybe pay you back some of your rent. And of course, they tend to have the mission to provide housing baked into their charter, so they will also develop new properties. You may think, oh no, this means I will own a smaller share as new people move in. Well, what's actually happening is that the co-op you rely on to maintain your home is going to become more stable because it has more stakeholders paying into it. This isn't the stock market. There is no dilution of stocks by new stocks being issued. This is the real world. The value you're getting out of this is not profit, but a nice home at an affordable price. Housing co-ops already exist. They're pretty competitive in many places, and they tend to lower rent prices for the whole area they operate in, which is why landlords fucking hate them and do everything they can to sabotage them at every turn. Similar situation, you could also own your bank. Credit unions offer every service a commercial bank offers, except for the bit where they try to fuck you over all the time and go gambling with your money. They don't offer that. In fact, they tend to pay you money. And if not money, then certainly value in the form of lower fees, reliable services, access to cash withdrawal machines, and all kinds of other little bits and bobs. They provide a disproportionate amount of small business loans, so they actually invest in the community. They were originally created in Germany by a guy who saw that banking services were essential to economic growth, but that commercial banks just wouldn't service rural communities because it wasn't profitable for them. Especially in the Anglosphere, credit unions are often limited in whom they accept as a member, but there's probably one you can be part of. Usually they're sort of local to an area. So you have to live in a certain city in order to be a member, and they will then be federated with other credit unions to provide services through them no matter where you are. So you might be forgiven for thinking that the Volksbank is just one huge bank and not hundreds of regional ventures, because you can get their services all over as though they were a huge enterprise. Something that can only really operate on a cooperative model is insurance. Everyone pays into a pot, and when there's a crisis with someone, there's enough money to cover them. The reason insurance sucks so much is because instead of working this way, the financier class is trying to run them as a scam. Cooperative insurance was the original form of insurance, but over time, it's been absorbed into one of the purest tools of financialization, operating on razor-thin margins and seeking to get only low-risk customers who ideally have no use for insurance anyway. They constantly extract money from the pool that is meant to benefit everyone who pays into it and gleefully let people die to pad that bottom line. Utilities are great for cooperative ownership models, though I personally think they should be state-run. Internet service providers should be co-ops. Just an example of a utility. But what they often do is they cut up the country and deliver the shittiest internet they can for the most money imaginable. If the customers instead owned a piece of the ISP, they couldn't get away with doing this because you would have an actual mechanism of control over this thing that delivers an essential service that benefits everyone. But why stop there? Streaming platforms, they ought to operate like libraries. This is what people want them to be. That is what they advertised themselves as before they cornered the market and began their process of profit extraction. You shouldn't have 15 different streaming services that are all trying to be as restrictive as possible in what you can see. You should have one subscription. And it should be all about providing you with the things you want to see. It might come with a flat fee that is distributed across all the media you consume, though it would probably be somewhat more complex as a model than this. You could apply the co-op principle to anything, large or small in scale. Delivery services and online shopping platforms might be owned by the people who buy and sell on them. You might own a piece of your local pub. They're called public houses for a reason. They are meant to be places where the community comes together. Similar business with a restaurant that is not a restaurant, but a local cantina, which used to be a much more ubiquitous way of getting your lunch, and certainly more cost efficient. The space could double as a community center. And that's what a lot of this is about. Fostering a shared sense of community and investment in the assets we all share. Instead of some billionaire, you might own a piece of your local sports ball team. There's a huge number of things where some variation of a partial or full co-op model could do wonders for commerce and the local community. So you might well ask, if this works so well, why isn't it already being done more? Well, it's not liability or risk. Business owners are rarely out there taking risks. Businesses as entities exist in order to absorb risk. And in a co-op, what risk remains is spread out over enough people as to not be a big problem. The simple reason is that not so very many people know about this. Many of these things are fairly recent ideas existing in unprecedented times. When I say recent, I mean they are in their most basic form at least sort of 2 centuries old, but many people had ideas about washing your hands well before germ theory was developed and formally accepted by the public. Or much like capitalism used to not exist a few centuries ago until people started doing it. Or frankly, how much like how they didn't really start doing this neoliberal hyper-financialized capitalism before the 70s. Though of course, certain economists predicted that this would happen back before we had electric light. It's been done enough that it's clear that it works, but it's not become the standard way of operating yet. Everyone knows how to work a salary job and rent an apartment, but there's not a lot of people who have much experience with cooperative ownership. Even if it's similar to the point of being almost the same, it's different conceptually and weird and scary to many folks. There's not that many business managers and lawyers who specialize in the legal landscape that it creates, and you need those kinds of people to set up this sort of venture. But I think what it mostly comes down to is that a lot of people just aren't aware of the option. And to a certain extent, this is on purpose. You see, all kinds of cooperative ownership models have one massive but crucial problem that they will never be able to overcome. They are dog shit at exploiting ordinary people and extracting profit by plundering their lives and resources. They fail spectacularly at currying the favor of the ultra-rich Epstein class, which en esta economía is unfortunately the deciding factor as to whether something will see the light of day or not. Epsteinites hate co-ops and anything associated with them. In many places, there are ways in which collective ownership is legally hampered and way more difficult to set up, not because it needs to be, but because it is meant to be difficult and unpopular. Right now, the entire cultural narrative is you should want us to come to your town to do resource extraction, and some of you might get a meager salary in return. Call that job creation. They will fight tooth and nail against a world where the town itself would benefit from the work that goes on there. They are the aristocracy of our era. They think of their ability to own and control you and your life as their divine right of kings. This is why the only future that they can envision is a future where you are a debt slave. They want you to give up on the very idea that a better world is possible so they can justify taking more shit from you. And the few of them who do not bathe themselves in the arrogance of willful ignorance are terrified. They want to suppress any form of democratic ownership of the economy at all costs. This is why they so desperately need you to believe that you already live in the most final and bestest and most optimal of times, and things can only get worse from here. These people know that the one thing ordinary people have is numbers. If we work together in our own mutual interest, we can absolutely change the way the world works. We can just do all this cooperative stuff. And people are doing it. Not through superior violence, but because we are the world which they seek to rule. You will always have the power of you being someone who actually makes things in the real economy. This is why the most important thing to them is to make you think that everyone is out to take something from you. Everyone is competition, and there are people out there whose very existence is in some way damaging to yours. They want you to hate thy neighbor, because they know that if you love thy neighbor instead, you may link arms with them. And if enough neighbors do this, soon an entire world will exist that refuses to be exploited. You don't need to find a way to escape life in society. You don't need to cheat the system. Every single person out there is a potential ally, a friend who shares your best interest because you have the same best interest. The Epstein class will do anything to prevent you from realizing this. They invest copious amounts of money into creating their own propaganda of cynicism, to drown you in meaningless brain rot and rob you of your ability to hope. But you know you're being exploited. These people are just trying to make sure you think it's anyone but them who's doing so. They need you to think of them as the job creators, when in fact it is you who does the actual work that creates value and the economy. And it is you who actually buys goods and services that will see others get paid. They are nothing but parasites on the economy, and the best thing we could do as a species is to rid ourselves of them. We can just make them obsolete. Co-ops are just one of the many options that exist in order to make that happen. And none of these options need to be the exclusive thing that completely changes the world on its own. Any of them will get some part of the job done. I've already mentioned the library of things in this very video. There's many videos out there who go way deeper into library economies. For certain things, and in certain aspects, it might be a good idea to take another look at planned economies. One of the main reasons why they failed so often was a lack of access to information and undemocratic control. And we currently live in what is called the information age. There's some pretty big nerds who would love to crunch that data in order to make sure everyone has enough to eat. Both Walmart and Amazon are arguably planned economies at this point, and they seem to be doing fine. They're just sort of directed toward profit extraction. As an aside, it is kind of telling that we joke about how under socialism people starve, but it's capitalism out there and people are in fact starving. The story we tell ourselves is that under socialism, we might be the ones starving instead of others. That's like every picture of like, oh, we compare socialism and capitalism is always like an image of a regular like apartment buildings in a favela in Brazil, and it's like, you're just showing capitalism. That's just what that is. But the truth is that starvation is a failure of socialism and an innate feature of capitalism. The threat of destitution is necessary for you to make yourself exploitable. There's much more esoteric ideas out there as well, and much simpler things like actually expecting better from your politicians that you elect into office. Unionization, you should be in a union, you should unionize. Because the government should be the ultimate co-op interested in the well-being of all. It's just been sabotaged and financialized to all hell. Because of course, the other problem with capitalism is that you eventually run out of public assets built with taxpayer money to sell to your cronies for a fraction of what they're worth, so you can pay 10 times the amount of taxpayer money to keep them running with way worse outcomes. Particularly in the tech world, there's a flood of opportunities coming up now. Cory Doctorow gave a talk recently where he goes into that, and it's wonderfully hopeful. All of these options are available to us to reclaim the things that were stolen from us for decades and centuries, and also to build a stronger, more interlinked, more mutualistic, more commerce-driven economy that actually produces quality commodities and distributes the benefits fairly. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this to your relevant communities. I'm especially interested in learning things. Many of you are going to be working in co-ops. Let me know what's going on there. Consider buying some of my merchandise or my novel. It does have a little bit of socialist themes in it. Unusual for a sci-fi western, I know, but they're also not like hyper-dominant. I feel the need to apologize for my recent absence. I had to take a mental health related medical recovery type break, followed by a physical health medical recovery type break, followed by my ADHD meds running out because my doctor was on vacation. But I'm also growing and changing as a person, so I won't apologize for my normal human body being a normal human body. And also not my doctor. He deserves a vacation. He works hard. And in that spirit, found a co-op, join a union, and see you around, friends.